Welcome to the Freedom Club podcast, where we discover the fight for freedom, fulfillment, passion, and purpose. Your host is Kurt Mercadante, Gallup certified strengths coach, an agency founder who is dedicated to coaching individuals seeking to level up their life and their businesses. The Freedom Club is about unlocking your talents, turning them into strengths, and crushing your objectives. You can learn more at kurtmercadante.com. Welcome to the Freedom Club.
This is the Freedom Club podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Mercadante. It's Thursday, April 5th, which means it's time for the Thursday interview segment. As you know, every Thursday I interview a business leader or some other all-around interesting person, and today we have just that. We have Evan Kirstel, global social media influencer. Evan and I have a great discussion about, of course, what the word freedom means to him, also how he turned a passion into a side hustle, into a very successful social media agency. We also talk about the social media landscape, how it has transformed business, and what he thinks it's going to look like in the next 5 years. So without further delay, here is my interview with global social media influencer, Evan Kirstel. All right, so I am here with global social media influencer, Evan Kirstel. How are you doing today, Evan?
I am living the dream. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Now, Evan is based in the greater Boston area, but depending on the week, you can find him just about anywhere in the world. Barcelona, Vegas, right?
Yeah, seat 24B. Look for me there.
Is that what you always that's your seat? Yeah.
I just made up a number, but
okay.
I'm on airplanes too much, and I was hoping this whole new digital virtual world we're in would mean less travel, but it's actually proving out to be the opposite. So what can you do?
Interesting. Well, it's funny when you said 24B. I flew JetBlue twice a month for years up to DC, and I always had, I think it was 13B. And I would always go for 13B. It was extra. I'm short, but I still like the extra legroom.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. So I want to get into what you do, social media trends, where we've been, where we're going. But the first question I always ask my guests is, it's the Freedom Club podcast after all, what does the word freedom mean to you?
Freedom is the ultimate sense of controlling one's own destiny and feeling that you are the master of charting your own course. And you're really not beholden to anyone but your, friends, family, and loved ones. But it's a bit cliche to talk about not having a boss, because actually that's not really true. I have 20 different bosses now in the form of clients.
Right.
And as Gary Vaynerchuk says, clients suck. But
right.
in all seriousness, it's not so much not having a boss, it's just having that independence of mind, thought, and action.
That's great. And it's I ask everyone that question, and while there's common themes throughout, everyone is unique. There always is a sense at the very heart of it of control over your own destiny. And sometimes that lack of control can come from external forces, but sometimes we can create our own prisons, right? Even when we work for ourselves.
Yeah, no, I was talking to you that, full disclosure, you're my coach, so I think that's no conflict of interest, is it?
Sure.
But
I'm not paying you to be here, right? Yeah.
Right, but I'm just kidding. But in any case, yeah, no, I've created a nice little prison for myself with the amount of work and clients and activity. So I'm working with you to figure out how to break free of that internal prison. But it's also a mindset, more than anything. Freedom and the freedom of choice and opportunity and action, and trying to think bigger than the day-to-day tactical grind,
And when you talk about freedom, you've had a journey. You worked in the corporate 9 to 5. Social media was your passion, and you turned it into a thriving business.
Yeah, it was kind of a success story in the sense that you hear about these side hustles and side hustle nation, and having a side hustle is the thing now. 5 years ago really wasn't. No one really knew what the term meant, but it's a great notion. No matter what job you're in, role you're in, life circumstance, the idea of having a second job has existed for a long time, but to do something you're passionate about as your side job and to try to over time turn that into your career is a novel concept, and so far it's working out well.
What would you tell, there's a lot of people out there who are in a 9 to 5 that maybe they hate, or maybe they're merely existing, and they really want to make that leap into either starting a side hustle or turning their side hustle into their full-time job, but maybe some fear holds them back. What would you tell someone who's afraid to make that jump?
Yeah, I'd say start small, start in a very focused way, and go step by step. I mean, I didn't just jump out and quit my job and yell freedom and sort of run out like Braveheart, onto the battlefield. I was working with couple clients on the side for a couple years, three clients, and it was some nice residual income, but not too much. And I was learning along the way and figuring out what that whole idea meant to work with clients, to have clients, to service them, and sort of along the way discovered that could be grown into a real business. I'm sure in many cases these things will remain a side hustle. They'll remain a side project or passion project, and that's fine too. And by the way, you're not wedded to any single idea. So if if it doesn't work out, you can try something else. But the beauty of it is to be passionate about it, to do something you're all in on, not just for the money or not just for the financial freedom.
And I like what you mentioned, if it doesn't work out, you try something else. And I had a video on LinkedIn earlier this week that talked about just, decision making and just the ability. Success goes to those people who just make a damn decision. It doesn't have to, they're so afraid of making the wrong choice. And my point was, sometimes the most difficult part is overcoming that inertia. And once you get momentum, even if you're going in the wrong direction, it's easier to turn yourself and self-correct to go to the right direction if you're actually moving. And so, if you're stuck in a rut, or you're stuck in a job where you're miserable, what do you have to lose, right? At least at least you'll be miserable doing something you love, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And there's this idea that this whole social digital world belongs to the youth. It belongs to the millennials. And I think that's such a terrible notion, that it's youngsters who own our digital future. In fact, if you combine some life background, life skills, real experience with mastery of these social digital tools, you can be far more effective than your 22-year-old social media guru.
Right.
So it's the idea your career. I think sadly a generation ago it was the case. If when you hit 60, 70, you weren't too many options. But the internet has changed everything, including second careers, second jobs, new businesses, side hustles. No matter what your background experience is, it just takes that new mindset shift.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Gary Vee. I mean, talk about a guy who's rocking it on social media. He's in his 40s, and he's delivering a message that is, in many cases, although he's very popular amongst millennials, is kind of a non-millennial message. And it's a message from someone who literally fled communist Russia with his family, and he comes from it almost with the same mindset that my dad did growing up in the Great Depression, which is, it's interesting. He said he was going to, I just watched a video where he said he's going to start a new show, and it's just going to be called and ... And people are going to come to him with their problems and say, well, my brother stole my last $8,000 and left. And Gary, his only response is going to be, and, and that's a message that is, I grew up with, but some people, they think it's a little too harsh these days. And so your point about it not just being a millennial or below, under tool is right on. Now, for those who wonder, what does Evan Kirstel is a social media influencer? What does that mean? What do you do?
Well, the first part, social media, is kind of evident to everyone. There are these new, not so new anymore, social digital channels that have emerged as platforms for everyone and anyone. In my case, it happens to be businesses who are now leveraging social channels for B2B, business to business engagement and sales and marketing, thought leadership. So that's the social media part. And influencer is also really nothing new. From the days of John Wayne smoking Marlboro, he was an influencer. So
Right.
we know influencers on the consumer marketing B2C side of things for eons. What's changed is B2B brands, the Intels and Oracles and IBMs of the world are now leveraging influencers to reach their target markets. And so I'm helping some big brands, small brands, startups, and a lot in between on the tech, B2B tech world, leverage my audience and my point of view to help them reach their target customers.
And what has been the secret sauce to your success in growing not just the numbers, right, but your influence, right? There's a lot of people with a lot of followers, et cetera, and you could tell they bought them and they're not engaged. But you have, I'll look and you'll share a video on LinkedIn and it's got 3,000 likes or something. What's the key to really building that strong tribe to where you become someone who does have, I don't want to say influence, but carries weight when you do shares and you recommend a brand?
Yeah, I think like anyone else on the social world these days, you've got to combine your personal obsession, your passion with these social tools and tactics. And mine happens to be tech, from being a kid soldering together electronics to today using all of these gadgets and apps and devices. It's been an obsession, a passion, and that is technology for my whole life. And so it's sharing that passion, which gets pretty obscure into enterprise tech applications and areas, but still a passion nonetheless with social. So my advice to everyone interested in growing their sort of digital social footprint is to talk and curate and write and tweet or post about things you're really passionate about. And no matter what that is, if you're focused enough and determined enough, you'll grow quote unquote influence in that area. And you'll grow. And frankly, the more niche, the better. There's the old joke, the riches are in the niches. I'm in some very niche technology areas, whether it's like quantum computing, but actually there are communities in all these areas that are ready-made for like-minded people to go in and engage and learn and share insights and information and articles, etc. So it's really important to identify your top 2, 3, 5, 6 interests and go deep on those. And that's what I do with enterprise and B2B tech and IT software, et cetera.
And that's great advice also for business, because there are a lot of folks who get into business and they, rather than really try to focus on their customer avatar or their persona, they try to be all things to all people, and they end up being so vanilla that they don't really appeal to people. You look at Gary Vee, he is an acquired taste, and there's, you and I are fans of him. There are some people who can't stand him. He drops F-bombs, he swears, he talks a mile a minute, he's very aggressive, but he attracts a certain part of person who becomes very loyal to him. And it's about building, like you said, that niche tribe. And there's people who don't like him, so maybe they go to Tony Robbins, right? Or they go to Tim Ferriss or something like that. And so that's some great advice. So you work with and have worked with some very, very large established brands and companies, tech companies. And you also work with brand new, startups. What is the common thread in terms of a challenge that no matter how big or how small they are, that you've seen them face?
I think there are many, there's a long list, but certainly top of the list is they focus on themselves. It's like, okay, we have this story to tell. We're just going to tell it. You know, we're going to talk about our news. We're going to talk about our products, our solutions, our stories, and it becomes pretty uninteresting because, like anything or anyone, who just talks about themselves, you get bored pretty quickly. So the key is talking to yourself to a degree, but then talking about other people, like this podcast. You know, we're sharing insights, talking about the latest industry news, adding your point of view to industry news and insights. It's sharing, curating news and content from others. So it's making yourself a source of valuable info. If you look at my feed, 99% of it is not about me. It's about other people, what's happening in the industry, and by the way, what my clients are doing, and that's why it's interesting, frankly. So that's the top thing. I think the other thing is assuming you can assign a 22-year-old intern to your social account and assume it's going to be interesting and relevant and useful. And the most interesting people, whether it's the CTO maybe in the company or the CEO, are usually not on social. So how can you engage and enlist those people to provide insights and to create social personas? And then beyond there's just a long list of more tactical things as well.
It's interesting because in my previous life, I had a public relations and advertising agency, and
my condolences.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, as you notice, it was my former industry, and we had a client, and this was back 06, 07, and there were blogs. Their big problem, they had incoming, with people who were in chat rooms or Yahoo, chat rooms. It was, Facebook, Twitter, those weren't yet out there. And so we built a transparency initiative with this. It was a large national healthcare corporation. And they weren't really being transparent before this. Their CEO was great and he was brand new. We started a blog, back then it was like you start a blog and that's state of the art. And he started blogging on there, and he would blog about his vacations and put family photos up there. It was the most effective. There were some people in the company who it has nothing to do with the company. It has nothing to do with what we do or our brand. It was the most effective thing we did because it humanized the brand. It used storytelling. It brought people in. And then, by the way, yeah, they would read the next 2 blog posts that had to do with the new initiative they were doing. But there's so many, and even, how you first reached out to me, it was on one of my videos. I don't even think I was on the beach. I don't even think
great.
I don't even think I was explaining what I do. You knew I was a coach. You followed it and then we did a call, but I can't remember even what I was talking about, but I guarantee I was talking about an issue, that a problem somebody may have. And there's so many people who don't understand it, and all they want to do is tweet, Facebook, write about, here's our product, here are the specs of our product, right? It's like Apple, right? The famous Think Different ad campaign didn't even show their product. It showed Einstein, it showed Martin Luther King, and they built a story and a message and a brand and a feeling and an emotion around them rather than talking about the boxes that they built.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And this notion of business to consumer, B2C, and business to business, B2B, is now morphing into human to human. And so it's really become this personalized one-on-one medium. And you want to speak to people. It's very primal kind of instinct. And it's the social part of social networking, which is a terrible name, of course, because it really is about communication more than social networking, whatever that is. So the more human you can be, I think the more engagement you get. And that's why, someone like me gets as much engagement or more than giant mega brands on these social networks, because people want to follow and chat with people who are real and three-dimensional and have mutual interests and frankly are funny and interesting, and not just pumping out data sheets, as you said.
Yeah. Do you follow, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Is it John Legare, the T-Mobile CEO?
Yeah, Jean Laguerre
Yeah.
Is a rock star. And it's a funny story. I don't know if you know him or his background, but he was a straight up, button up, laced up business guy within AT&T Business, suit wearing, very very sort of traditional leader executive. And at T-Mobile, he kind of said, screw it, I'm just going to come out of my shell and be myself. And he had all these interests in fashion and cooking and a little bit zany character. And he just decided, I'm going to take the reins of this social thing. And around my uncarrier campaign, on my business campaign, I'm going to be myself. And he's, the top tweeting CEO out there with millions of followers. And he's single-handedly, through this transformation of the company at T-Mobile, and great business decisions and marketing and everything else, but through his personas has disrupted the whole wireless industry.
It's funny. He's got, what is it? Every Sunday on Twitter, he's got a live cooking show, I believe.
Yeah, it's amazing because you know what? He likes to cook. So people are interested in that. And, if you tweet him and you have, I actually, I switched to T-Mobile from AT&T because he tweet, he responds to something I said. And so come on, man, you gotta come over. Just do it.
That's funny.
And whether it was him or one of his underlings tweeting, who knows, but he's engaging and he'll retweet you and mention you. He's sort of the nice version of POTUS. He's just a really tweets for good. He's just a genuine, interesting guy, and he lets it all hang out. And there are many examples now of CEOs who get it, whether it's like a Mark Benioff at Salesforce or others. And then sadly, there are so many CEOs who just are completely invisible or don't tweet, or like you said earlier, scared of it and are missing out. So there's a real haves versus have-nots emerging on the social CEO, social leadership side.
There was I once had a client and they wanted to be, state of the art. So we're going to tweet. I mean, this was, I don't know, 8 years ago or so.
Oh, that was early.
And
yeah.
So they were going to live tweet during an event that was happening else. Like it wasn't happening in the office. So they had people, they didn't have someone at the event. They had people in the office and all of them were watching. Now the offices were actually spread out on the floor. And they had, I think there were 5 or 6 people involved, including a lawyer who wasn't even there. They were so afraid of tweeting out anything that wasn't lawyered up on a live event that it was like an assembly line of people who would say, oh, he said this, let's say that. And it would go down the line, including the lawyer, until it finally got to their quote unquote social media person who would then physically write the tweet. So the live tweeting turned into a delay of about 20 minutes every time we had to tweet. And it's funny because several years later, there was an article about the Romney presidential campaign. And I think for every tweet they had to write, there was like 12 people involved or something crazy like that. And, then you look at T-Mobile and you see how it can be done. And I'm sure his lawyers, and there are some people within the company who are shitting bricks every time he tweets, but you know what? It's effective for him. And he's smart enough that, he's not going to get himself into trouble.
Yeah, and all these years later, 8 years later, it's still companies have this this fear and uncertainty on how to leverage these channels, which are changing.
Right.
I mean, we're doing live video now. We're doing Snapchat. We're doing messaging centric stuff, and you have to constantly learn and evolve and adapt to these new platforms.
And I think, for so long, there has been such a button down, slick nature to communications, the 30-second ads that are so highly produced. And then a lot of big brands' ideas of being state of the art on social is they would just take the same 30-second ad they put on the networks and they would throw that on Facebook. And when you look at someone like John, when you look at, and I bring him up knowing that there's people who love him and hate him. And there's not a lot of people in between, but you brought up POTUS and Trump. I think that there's, whether it's Trump, whether it's the T-Mobile CEO, whether it's some other brands, whether it's a guy like Gary Vee, it's finding that niche of people who are so sick of the canned, buttoned up or buttoned down, slick stuff that when they see something that's kind of raw and unfinished and unpolished and people saying things that might not be the right thing to say or the appropriate thing to say, it's just like you said, you find that tribe, that niche who's really committed to you. And I think that's where, again, there's people who love Gary Vee. There's people who hate him. There's obviously people who love Trump. There's people who hate Trump.
And I think it extends to this new generation we call millennials, who are broadly rejecting traditional advertising,
right,
traditional media, traditional TV and cable. They're rejecting much about what we've come to sort of accept as the norm. And, this is the future. So if you want to study where you think where we're going, you got to watch millennial behavior. And increasingly they're rejecting Facebook and even these channels that we've always assumed as future proof. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see evolve.
So that's a great segue into our final question, which is, and we talked about this a little bit last week in terms of, Gary Vee's, he wants to go where no one is yet. And so it's the next big thing. That's why I went to LinkedIn video, because Gary Vee said LinkedIn video is new and LinkedIn's changing stuff, Where
Right.
do you see Facebook's had a lot of problems, whether or not this will be their downfall or just a hiccup, right? Twitter has had interesting issues in the last 5 years. Where do you see 5 years down the line, where do you see the social media landscape at? And what does it look like, do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll be some version of itself today. But I do see messaging centric communities being really interesting. We all use SMS. We're all text mad, text savvy. Some parts of the world, China, WeChat is essentially Amazon plus Facebook combined, and it's basically a messaging platform. So I think messaging and simple text interfaces will be driving a lot of user behavior. So that'll be really it. And whether it's Facebook Messenger who wins, or Slack, or some version of a variant of that, will be fun to see. And I think voice interfaces, have a big future. And I'm a huge fan of Alexa. Developers are now building skills and applications on voice. So whether that turns into a social network feature remains to be seen, but it'll certainly be driving a lot of our attention and time, voice that is, over the next 5 to 10 years.
Who do you think's in the best position now of the voice? You have Google, you have Amazon, you have Siri, or you have Alexa and Siri. Who right now is in the best position voice-wise to capitalize, do you think?
Yeah, no question. Amazon, it's their game to lose. Alexa's been a smash hit, and they're doing all the right things in terms of supporting developers, building applications, enabling new form factors, putting it in cars and phones and TVs. But don't count Google out, and their voice activated services with AI and other technologies are working their way into everything from smartphones to smart homes as well. So it'll be an epic battle royale, but at the end of the day, it'll be really good for the consumer.
Well, that's excellent. Well, Evan, I want to thank you for joining us on the Freedom Club podcast. Let everyone know. So if people want to, you're everywhere, right? But if people want to find you, where's the best place to find Evan online?
At Twitter, Evan Kirstel, EvanKirstel. Thanks very much.
Excellent. And I will put that link in the show notes. Evan, thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for listening.
Take care.